about me. I don't need to go through this once again. So like Kathy mentioned, we've got Rayo Racing, IR Sports, Indy Karting, and Ajmer Indy Karting, which is a karting facility and motorsport facility in Mumbai. So coming on to, before we start, just a little bit that I would like to talk about such competitions like the Formula Bharat and why it is so critical to participate in these competitions. My experience, whenever I've interacted with any engineer who has come fresh out of finishing their education, they have a lot of book knowledge, but you guys don't have actual practical real world knowledge. And what such competitions do for you is they prepare you really well for the real world, especially since you're into automobile engineering related to automobiles. And having book knowledge is one thing, and having practical knowledge in terms of actually probably putting together an engine, removing an engine, things like that, this knowledge can be gained only through experience. So this competition is what really prepares you for the real world. So to begin with, it's very shocking as to how many teams, based on my experience in the past, actually do not read the rules. It's something that probably teams put off for later. They think it's not very important. They learn along the way. I'm not sure what it is. But when I just looked at the Formula Bharat rule book, it was 125 pages long. And I think that shows what level the competition has been thought at, the kind of thought that has gone into conceiving and preparing something of this nature. And obviously, if you will want to succeed, you'll really need to look at the rules properly. So your entire basis of competing, what are you competing for, is based on the rule book. There are primarily two different ways that you can segregate these rules. That's the sporting rules and the technical rules. And what I would suggest is each team, especially since you all are such large teams, you all can dedicate at least one person whose only role is to keep looking at the rules and seeing that the entire team is consistently in compliance with these rules. So coming to the sporting rules, this is something that is critical to the drivers. This basically governs your actual competition. It does not involve your technical rules into, for example, the dimensions of your vehicle or what sort of engine you can use, etc. It's all about how you can overtake somebody if you're doing the endurance event, or for example, if you're doing an acceleration event, how much are you allowed to deviate from a particular straight line, maybe, or whatever. So the sporting rules is something which is very, very critical for whoever is the person who's going to be driving the team's car or kart. And the rest of the team also need to be generally aware of all these rules. It's not critical for the designers, but it's important for them to be aware. And very important, in the framework of the rules, there's always during the competition things that can go wrong, or maybe there'll be situations where something different will happen. You need to plan for those kind of contingencies. What are you going to do at that time? Coming to the technical rules, it's very straightforward. It's basically what you can do and what you cannot do. And again, here, this is something based on my previous experience when I've organized such events, maybe about 7, 8, 10 years ago, almost now. It is shocking as to how many teams fail basic eligibility. If your rule book states that your car has to be X mm wide, it cannot be X plus 1 mm wider than that. And these are the most basic things that teams sometimes, I don't know for what reason, forget to really go into this. This is something that you should never, fail at. And right from the beginning, before you even start designing your car, I would say it's important to prioritize what is important. So I've just added this table with respect to the Formula Bharat, what I got out from the regulations. As you can see over here, your most important event that can make a huge difference is your endurance event. 325 points. I've seen teams, for example, go crazy about a particular design element in the way maybe they put lights on their cars. And fine, if you've got a fantastic design element, you'll earn maybe 150 points if you win the design section. But how is that going to affect your endurance event? You could be losing a potential 325 points over there. So everything needs to be done on the basis of this points table. Plan what is important, and accordingly you should design your car. Accordingly you should plan your entire competition. A lot of times I've seen teams, they don't factor basic things like the driver load. How does the driver's load affect the geometry of the car once the driver sits into it? They don't factor wear and tear. And what I suggest, when you're reading the rules, if you have any gray areas, you think something is not clear, it's best to clarify it before you start the competition. Moving on to how you should choose a driver. Again, this is something which I've seen very often. I mean, teams absolutely have a driver that is wrong for them. And the reason I put so much stress into this, especially some of you all, if you all have a little bit of experience with these competitions, you will realize that once you have reached the peak performance of your vehicle, for example, let's say you're doing your acceleration test, I'm sure all of you will know that to gain 1 second of time during the in from your vehicle in an acceleration test will take a monumental effort to just gain 1 second. But having the wrong driver can lose you 3 to 4 seconds. May not be in the acceleration test, you will not lose 3 to 4 seconds from a wrong driver, but maybe even 2 seconds you can lose from the wrong driver. In an endurance, definitely having the wrong driver will lose you 20 seconds, 30 seconds. That could be the difference between sometimes coming first and coming 20th. So a lot of effort needs to going into choosing the right driver. It's important to see what are the dimensions of the cockpit where the driver is actually going to sit. Therefore, the size of the driver matters. Having a driver who is very tall is going to be a definite disadvantage. Having a driver who is maybe very short and then can't reach the pedals, for which you need to make extensions or something like that, is also not the right fit. So for your vehicle, you need to find out what is the right size of the driver. Very important, which overcomes everything else, is the driver's skill set. Weight plays a huge role. I've seen teams actually where a driver is 100 kgs plus. Straight away, you could have the best vehicle, but if your driver is 20 kgs heavier than a competitor's driver whose car is maybe somewhere similar to yours, just because of your driver being 20 kilos heavier, you're losing out. Then you need to figure out how quick is your driver, what sort of a lap time can a driver put in. Important again, is your driver willing to practice? Is your driver willing to put in effort to getting better? Is your driver willing to test continuously? Has your driver received training? And definitely a driver who has had experience competing before is going to be better than a driver who has no experience. What are the attributes of a good driver? Very important that a driver is level-headed, calm, composed. You don't want somebody who is going to lose their shit because some official has said something to them. You don't want a driver who's going to start abusing the officials over there. So having the right temperament is very important. Important that your driver is intelligent, somebody who can think on their feet, somebody who can adapt to situations. Very important, especially when it comes to the endurance event, the driver should be physically fit. Importantly, is willing to put in effort, like I said, and also something which in a moment can take you from hero to zero. You don't want somebody who is a massive show off, because being brash and being overconfident is also not good. Okay, coming to some actual points as to what could help you when you are out there in terms of your driver training, so to speak. I'll just touch upon a few points. So this is a term that you all may have heard of very often, the racing line. So what is the racing line? The racing line, first of all, is an imaginary line. You can see in this diagram over here, the green line is the imaginary line. It's the fastest way around a circuit. A lot of times people misinterpret the racing line as the shortest line around a circuit. It's not necessarily the shortest line around the circuit. It is definitely the fastest way around a circuit. How do you find a racing line? There is no fixed rule, but generally you would want to start from the outside of a corner, go towards the inside, come closest to the inside as possible. The point where you come closest to the inside is known as your apex, and then once again go outside. So outside, inside to your apex, and outside again. That is a general rule on any normal straightforward corner. Of course, there are exceptions. If you have one corner leading into another corner, you will not want to go out as wide as possible from the first corner. And importantly, you need to use the full width of the track. What does this mean? So if your track is 8 meters wide, you want to be as outside as possible using the complete width. If you're going to turn in from the middle of the track, you're not using the full width, and this will slow you down for sure. Braking. A lot of street racers, all the people who think they're really fast when they race on the road, think that braking is for sissies, braking is for losers. It's an absolute misconception. Braking actually helps you go faster. How, if you ask? Imagine a situation where you are on full throttle, you are going at 100 kilometers an hour on full acceleration, and you come to a corner. The maximum speed that you can take through the corner for that car is 50 kilometers an hour. If you come at 100 kilometers an hour and you don't brake, it means you'll have to lift off the accelerator much, much earlier. That means for a considerable distance, you are traveling not at full acceleration. Instead, somebody who uses the brakes effectively, properly, can keep staying on the accelerator till the last moment, come to their braking point, brake hard, reduce the speed down from 100 to 50 in a very short distance. So in short, they are on the accelerator for a much longer time. Therefore, braking effectively has enabled that driver to go faster. Okay, so some tips on braking. On the road, typically, if any of you all are driving, the right technique to brake on the road is you should press the brake lightly initially. And if you're not slowed down enough, start going harder on the brakes, harder on the brakes. That is absolutely the reverse of what you should do in a track scenario or in a motorsport scenario. Ideally, you would want to go on the brakes as hard as possible initially. The moment you hit the brakes, you should go in as hard as possible, obviously without locking up your wheels. And then as the speed starts reducing, you want to slowly start easing off the brake pedal. So in short, heavy braking right in the beginning, and then later light braking. Don't let go of the brake pedal completely in one go. What happens is, if this is your car, you brake hard, your car will dive down in the front. If you suddenly let go of the pedal, your weight transfer will be too violent, and this will affect the way you enter the corner. So it's important to leave the brake pedal gradually. Don't let go from 100 to 0 in one shot. Depending on the situation, especially with heavy braking, you want to ideally brake in a straight line. If it's a very long corner, maybe a different type of a corner, the situation may change. You may need to brake while cornering, but ideally brake in a straight line. Brake first and then do your gear change. Don't do your gear change first and then brake, because this will lock up your driven wheels. Do not lock up your wheels. It's not good to, When I say lock up your wheels, that means your wheels which are rotating come to a complete standstill. Don't let that happen. You will ruin your tires. Keep in mind that if it's a long endurance, the longer you are on track, your braking efficiency will reduce, temperature will affect your braking efficiency. A lot of external factors affect braking. So keep those things in mind when you are braking. Similarly, in terms of accelerating, you would like to go on the accelerator pedal in a very smooth way. Okay, it doesn't have to be so slow, but it needs to be linear. It needs to be smooth. You can't go from 0 to 100 in one shot. If you do that, again, you're likely to get wheel spin. You're likely to imbalance your car, change the weight transfer very suddenly, which is again going to affect you. Similarly, ideally, when you start going on the accelerator, you want to keep going on more and more and more. Avoid a situation where you go on and you're off and you're on and you're off, because that what happens is they are going to completely keep changing the weight transfer in your the weight is going to constantly keep transferring from the front to the rear, and that is going to create an imbalance, and you're not going to be able to take the corner at the optimum speed. So be smooth on your movements. Don't keep going on and off. In case of certain situations where maybe you get a little bit of wheel spin, be ready to make small adjustments. Realize what is happening. If you're getting wheel spin, you need to realize that. If you're running out of track, you need to realize that. You're getting understeer, you need to realize that, and accordingly make a few adjustments. Similar to braking, be aware, is the track wet? Is there gravel on the track because somebody has gone off? All these things will affect your acceleration. Coming to understeer, I'm sure most of you should already be aware of understeer. You should be know what it is, but for those who don't, how do you define understeer? It's very simple. If you want to turn for a particular corner, you turn expecting that the car will turn the way you want it, but it doesn't turn as much as you want it. It understeers. What are the main causes of understeer? It could be the vehicle, it could be the driver, it could be an external attribute. Vehicle, it means maybe your geometry is not right for that particular situation. It could be your tire pressures, it could be your tires are worn out. When it comes to the driver, it could be as simple as the driver is not driving properly, the driver is too fast for that corner. External could be the track, the weather, it could be sand. Now, what's the simplest way to solve understeer on a track? The simplest way to solve it when you're on the track, as in while you're driving, is to simply lift off the accelerator. What happens is, as you're going, if you simply lift off the accelerator, you're going to transfer a little bit of weight to the front. That is going to give you a little bit more grip in the front, and you will solve the understeer. If it doesn't solve with a little bit of accelerator lift off, brake. That will definitely solve the understeer. And of course, outside the car, when you come back to the pits, if you realize there is an inherent problem with the car because of which it is understeering a lot, come to a solution based on the cause. Don't simply try and solve something when it is not the cause. So for example, if your tires are worn out, then changing the geometry is not the best solution. Change your tires. So your solution needs to be linked to what the cause is. Similarly, oversteer, very simple. You steer and it turns more than what you wanted to turn. That's oversteer. Again, it could be the vehicle, it could be the driver, it could be an external situation. How do you solve oversteer? Very simple. You solve it by doing what is known as a counter steer. So if you're turning in to the corner and you suddenly start getting oversteer, you simply turn the opposite direction momentarily, just for a second, and back again. That is called a counter steer. Unlike oversteer, you should not lift off the accelerator to cure an oversteer. If you lift off the accelerator to cure an oversteer, what will happen is actually you will end up spinning around. Why? Because the moment you lift off the accelerator, you're transferring all the weight to the front of the car, you're making the rear wheels looser, and you're likely to spin around. Of course, in the situation that you're going to go and crash into something because of an oversteer, by all means, yes, please lift off the uh, accelerator and start braking. Don't stay flat on the accelerator and crash into something and then driver said not to lift off. Okay, so you need to be smart about each situation. Again, same as as understeer, your solution needs to be linked to what is causing that oversteer. Resistance, this is something that teams don't realize is very vital to being quick. If you sometimes have too much of toe in, toe out, something else related to your geometry, something else related to your setup, that could cause a lot of resistance, especially if you have a long straight on your track. You may even want to set up your car differently for an acceleration run, differently for a skid pad test of some sort, or maybe an endurance. Your setup will be different for all these. Your body work very often may be a loose body work, maybe a body panel that is sticking out from somewhere. All this can cause a lot of drag and can result in a slower car. So sometimes the team is just working on engine, whereas it's something else that is causing the resistance. Driver, ideally you want to have your steering wheel straight at all times. Every time you turn the steering wheel, you're creating resistance. This is something that most drivers tend to forget, especially when they are in their early years of driving. Which is why, if any of you all watch Formula One or any other forms of circuit racing, you'll see very often that when drivers line up on the grid, sometimes they will angle their car slightly towards another car. The reason they do that is because they want to block off another driver, but they don't want to turn the steering wheel to block off the other driver. They want to keep the car in that line from before so that they don't have to turn the steering wheel. Again, this is something that I've seen loads and loads of teams just absolutely forget to do. Testing. If you want to succeed, you need to test your car, you need to test your car, and you need to test your car. And when you're done testing, test some more. I understand it's not easy. There are a lot of challenges. There's not enough space for you all to test. Go to the local go-kart track if there is one. Find an empty parking lot. Please make sure that you follow all safety norms, of course. But it was shocking a few years ago when I realized that a lot of teams just absolutely don't do any testing. And you can never succeed if you're not going to test. What are the things that you need to test? Your geometrical setup, like I told you earlier, for different activities, you will need a different setup. Obviously, your engine maps, your settings. I don't think you'll use carburetors anymore, but otherwise, carburation settings are very critical. Tire pressures, something that is forgotten very, very often. Tire pressures. Teams will break their heads over innumerable things, but forget completely about tire pressures. Tire pressures are absolutely critical. Body work again. For an acceleration run, maybe your body work would be a little different. Of course, body work doesn't matter so much if you're going at speeds which are less than 80 kilometers an hour. Driving style, again, matters a lot. Different activities require slightly different driving style. There's no point in testing if you're not going to document everything. It's important that you document this because in the future, when you come up against a peculiar situation, if you've documented everything properly, maybe you'll have a solution very easily. The other importance of testing is you will learn the reliability of your vehicle. You will realize what is going to break after a particular distance, after how much of track time is a particular component going to break. Again, different weather will have different effects on your car. So please test in different types of weather. You would ideally like to test when it's raining, you would like to test when it's really hot, you would like to test when it's cool. Test, test, test. How do you prepare for your event? First and foremost, revise the rules. have some sort of a strategy, especially when it comes to the endurance event, which is important. For example, your acceleration run straightforward, just simply have the lightest driver because you're just going in a straight line. You need to be aware of last minute changes. There may be small rule changes, there may be schedule changes. If you come to know of these things very late, it affects your preparation. Think ahead. When I say think ahead, I mean think of anything and everything under the sun. Small things like, do we have our lunch sorted? Do we have our transportation sorted? These are things which will actually affect your performance on track, because a hungry team is not going to do well. A team which is deprived of sleep is not going to do well. Have ample amount of spares with you, especially based on your testing. If you know something breaks, keep that there. Think of everything, especially when you're transporting an entire vehicle to the track. Having 2 extra crates or 3 extra crates of spares is not going to hurt you. We've actually sometimes lost in situations as a racing team when maybe we have had a spare tire, but we've forgotten something as simple as a tire valve. Okay. And the tire valve may have gotten damaged in an accident. And because of not having a 150 rupee tire valve, you lose out going on the track on time. Again, tools. It's surprising how many teams land up not having the right tools. Then you have to go and beg and borrow from other teams. Small things. I know you have certain regulations that you can't do your welding on your own. I don't know what those rules are, so read those rules. But today, most good tools are not very expensive. Maybe borrow it from a workshop for your competition, but try and have everything with you. Have an internal schedule with for your own team, which basically states what time you're going to leave for the track, what time you're going to have your lunch, what time is somebody in your team going to go and meet an official, for example. What time are you going to get the car ready? What time are you going to get the car warmed up before the competition? Things like that. Sometimes, depending on the track you are at, distances are quite large between, say, the pit lane and the start of the start line, or maybe a certain other activity is maybe 500 meters away or 300 meters away. Plan in advance. Again, walkie talkies are not expensive, or obviously mobile works, but have a plan for your communication. Very important, so that you don't have chaos, especially when you have a large team of 15 people, 20 people. Assign everyone's roles and responsibilities. Otherwise, what will happen is on race day, 2, 3 people will think that the other person is taking care of something. Besides that, you will also have situations where some people feel that they're doing all the work and some people are not doing enough work. So, well in advance, sit down, plan everyone's role and responsibility. And finally, very important again to succeeding is you need to relax and enjoy the competition. Beyond a point, there's no point getting stressed. If it doesn't go well, it doesn't go well. Enjoy the experience. Very important, learn from the experience. Like I said, all this is very important for your learning and for your future. Coming to a little bit of hardcore motorsport, so that you can understand a little bit of how motorsport works worldwide. There are tons and tons of different types of motorsport, ranging from the very formal circuit racing to some absolutely crazy things. So we'll stick right now to circuit racing. Obviously, the start is karting. You've got 4-stroke karting, you've got 2-stroke karting, and then when it comes to cars, you've got Formula 4, Formula 3, Formula 2, Formula 1, which has all been streamlined in the last few years. Otherwise, earlier you had loads and loads of different categories. This has all been streamlined in the last few years by the FIA. What are the types of motorsport that we have in India? We've got Formula racing, we've got saloon, touring, or prototype car racing. Not so much in India, prototypes, but saloon cars and touring cars, yes. We got bike racing, rallying, karting, autocross, raid, and cross country rallying, and we've got auto gymkhanas and TSD. Coming to karting, these are the championships that we have in India currently. The simplest and easiest ways to get involved is the four-stroke karting series, which is the Indy Karting National Series. If you come to Formula Racing, there are two main championships, which are the MRF Championship and the JK Tyre Championship. Both are national championships. You've got the Formula LGB, you've got the Formula 1600, which is at this point of time now defunct. Last year was the last year, or rather 2019 was the last year. You've got the Formula 1300, which is a good place to start. It runs in both the championships, and then you've got the MRF Challenge, which is very expensive. That's the highest level. Coming to saloon car racing, we've got the Indian Touring Car Championship, which is very expensive. It's the only championship actually where you can have different makes of cars. The most popular and the most professionally run championship is the Volkswagen National Championship. Then you've got the IJTC and the Super Stock, which is basically small modifications to existing cars. And then you've got the ETS Cup, which has kind of been resurrected and is being run. Coming to esports, gaining a lot of traction. It's the easiest and the most affordable way for you to get started. The benefit of esports with respect to motorsport is that a very large chunk of your skill set remains the same, whether you're racing in an esports competition or you're racing in a real world competition. We've got the Indian e-racing championship, which is the premier championship in the country today with respect to e-racing. There was the Volkswagen Virtual Racing Championship, which was huge. It was conducted last year. The winner got a actual fully sponsored drive in the real world Polo National Championship. And then we've got Revit by Formula Bharat, which is unique and the first of its kind engineering esports competition. And this is something which I think a lot of teams should definitely take part in, because it is a good way for engineers to learn how they can set up cars, how the setup will actually affect the car's performance on track without having to do it with your cars in the real world. So doing it in an esports kind of a scenario absolutely takes away 99% of the cost, I would say. It makes it something that is very easy for you guys to do. You can do it literally anytime you want, any time of the day or night. And you can actually see in front of you how your changes are affecting the speed of the car. So this is something I think all of you all should take part in. Coming to a lot of questions that people keep asking, how we want to get into motorsport as a driver, what should we do? So no matter what your age, there is no substitute to go-karting. If you look at all the greats in Formula One, if you look at every driver today in Formula One, not a single one of them have bypassed karting. All of them have spent years and years and years in karting and spent only a few years in car racing. If you look at Max Verstappen, who is leading the world championship today, he spent all his life in karting. In between karting and Formula One, he had just 1 year of car racing. So karting is your foundation. Get in touch with an academy or a team. They will guide you. It's always important to get trained. Without training, no matter how good you think you are, it's not about just pressing the accelerator, braking as late as possible. There's a lot of knowledge that is required to be successful. Go in for a short program or go in for an extended program. Then ask that team or academy. They will guide you as to how you can take part in a competition. After that, it's as simple as signing up and paying the participation fees to a team and racing. One fantastic avenue that I just spoke about is esports. A lot of you can use esports as a way of getting into motorsport. The biggest advantage being it's affordable. Motorsport is an expensive sport, unfortunately. However, India is still the most affordable place in the world, I would say, where you can race. entering motorsport as an engineer, again, we get tons and tons of requests from various students that they would like to come and intern, they would like to come and work with us as an engineer. Unfortunately, I would say as a long-term job prospect, the opportunities which are well paying in India are very, very limited. The main reason for this is that almost everything is a one make championship, which is basically the rules are standard for everyone, the cars, the equipment, everything is standard for everybody. So there's no innovation happening, there is no development which is happening for which engineers are required. You should look at maybe interning or working with a team, but keep in mind that teams are not going to be very forthcoming about this, because from personal experience, I can say what matters much more is your experience versus how good you were in college. What are your marks? And again, whenever we take anybody, we give phenomenal amount of importance to anybody who has had a very active role in a competition such as the Formula Bharat, especially if the team has done well. It shows that you have overall motorsport experience, and that experience, trust me, will count irrespective of what field you are in any automobile related role future in your future. So like I said, participate in competitions like these, and I just spoke about it, experience is much more valuable than your degree. So that's about it. Thank you very much for taking the time out. If you want to reach out to me, I'm on Instagram, Rayoman Banaji, Twitter as Rayoman B. I'm sorry, I don't know how to get my LinkedIn profile. I've not updated that in, I think, 8 or 10 years.
Okay.
I'll try and do that. There is a room that I will be coming to shortly. So if you all want to connect over there, but I'll just check if there are any.
Yeah, there are a
Question.
few questions.
Yeah.
Let me just pull it out. The first question is, are go-karting events a great way to select drivers, or is it going to be very different when you're actually selecting drivers for FS? This is from Mohammed Sharif.
Very good question, Mohammed Sharif. So I'll put it this way. A good driver is a good driver. Today, Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, these are seen as the best drivers in Formula One. For those of you who follow Formula One, they were absolutely outstanding as go-karters. So anyone who is good in go-karting is going to be good in any form of motorsport. Your skill sets, whether you're in go-karting or anything, or even esports, I would say one way of looking at selecting drivers today is via esports, because it's accessible, it's easy. So I'll just touch upon that point that we were talking about earlier as to the similarity between esports and real world racing. So your skill set is pretty much the same. The main difference between esports and the real world is that there is no danger. There is actually no speed. You brake a little bit late and you go off the track. In the real world, you could really hurt yourself. You could really completely total your car. That's not going to happen in esports. So that is one big difference. So other than the temperament, how does a person react to pressure? And the second big difference is fitness. Other than these two aspects, I would say almost your entire skill set is the same. So coming back to the go-karting question, if you don't have access to a racetrack, or you don't have access to checking out, comparing your drivers in your actual car, go-karting is good enough. To give an example, for the Volkswagen National Championship, I think since the last 8 years now, all the selection programs have happened via go-karting. So anyone who's good in a go-kart will also be good in a car. In short, yes, you can go ahead and do your selections via go-karting.
All right. Our next question is, do you see the motorsport scene in India changing for the better? This is from Shamal.
Shamal, yes, I would say in the last few years, the motorsport scene has definitely been getting better. It has been stagnant, I would say, over the last 3 years or so. But there is a very strong possibility that we're going to have an Indian F3 series or an Indian F4 series coming up soon. More and more companies are looking at motorsport with respect to India. The big challenge, I would say, for the growth of motorsport is primarily the lack of tracks that we have around us. We have only three racing tracks in India at the moment, and we have maybe just a handful of karting tracks in the country. I apologize, there's a crew outside my window. But anyway, so the biggest challenge is there are not enough facilities around the country. And until that can grow phenomenally, it's not going to be easy for motorsport to really grow. But there is a lot of interest. More and more companies are looking at motorsport. There's huge interest from participants. So it will keep growing. It will steadily improve, but I don't see something immensely new in the next 1 or 2 years, other than the fact, like I said, we will be having an F3 championship hopefully very soon.
Great, thank you. We have a couple more questions if you're okay
Sure.
with answering.
Yes,
away.
you can go ahead over here, and then I can go to the room that you had suggested.
Sounds good. How do you enter into the motorsports how do you enter into motorsports after graduation? I heard that it can be harder for Indian students particularly.
So I presume you're meaning again as an engineer or somebody who's working on the technical side. I just covered those points.
Yes.
It's not that it's harder for Indians. It's just that if we compare ourselves to Europe, it's very difficult for me to put a number, but I would say easily there are maybe 20,000 different motorsport competitions happening across Europe in a year, at least, across different categories of motorsport. Whereas in India, there are not more than 350 motorsport competitions happening in a year. So it's just the sheer size of the market. Number two, as I spoke, almost everything that we have in India is one make. That is that there is no development happening. There is no innovation that is happening. There is nothing new that is happening. You just need to take the exact same car and make it go as fast as possible. Whereas abroad, I would say there are more championships which require engineers as compared to the number of championships in India that require engineers. So definitely the number of opportunities that you have for, I would say for every probably 300 openings that you would, or not even 300, I would say maybe for every 800 to 900 openings that you would have in a motorsport role in Europe, you would have one in India. That is the kind of difference in the market size. So from that perspective, yes, it is difficult. The other thing also is, for example, I'd say our technical head, who is a former racer, he is definitely one of the best in the country today when it comes to the technical side of things. He has zero formal knowledge when it comes to, I mean, he's not an engineer, in short. He has no technical background. It's just years and years of doing things on your own and actually seeing what works and what doesn't work. So we've had engineers come to us who are fantastic. They will know every law in the book. They will know every theorem, every concept, everything. But actually, if they had to drive a vehicle, they will not know how tire pressure is going to affect them when they drive that vehicle. So that can only come from practical experience of doing things yourself. So until you spend years doing this, you're not going to be good. And therefore, any organization in India, any team in India is going to prefer somebody who doesn't know the language, who doesn't have, who's uneducated also, as long as he's worked in motorsport for maybe 5 or 7 years. So that's what you're up, that's the challenge that you guys have. So I would say motorsport is a great place to gain experience for anything that you would want to do in the automobile sphere, which is why I keep saying that competitions like Formula Bharat are phenomenal. Take it in its right spirit. Don't do it in the typical Indian way of trying to succeed. The best way to succeed would be to maybe copy last year's car or copy somebody else's car, which is the best car. But that doesn't teach you anything. If you really want to learn, if you really want to develop, start from scratch and make the car yourself. And if done, if these competitions are participated in the right spirit, it's phenomenal what you can learn out of these. So that's what you guys should be doing.
Yes,
Next
thanks,
question.
Revu. Yeah, next question. Could you please recommend any good simulators which we can use for practicing? This from Methil. Vivek, sorry.
Uh, so see, really good simulators are expensive, and I would say that rather than spending money on an expensive simulator, you'd rather maybe do a little bit of go-kart training. That would be money well spent. Go in for any basic simulator. Uh, Thrustmaster has good products in India. So go with any of their mid-range wheels, anything which costs, I would say, upwards of 20-25,000 for a set of wheel and pedals from Thrustmaster should be good. Don't, like I said, go in for anything that is too expensive. And our first esports champion, if I'm not, or rather, I would say that the person I consider the best today, he won the Volkswagen Virtual Racing Championship. He also won the Indian Racing Championship. He started off by using a simple wheel and sitting on a plastic chair and his desk. It's only later that he got a rig. So don't worry too much about the equipment. Worry more about spending actual time. And like I said, if you are willing to invest a little bit, then go in for a karting training program that will teach you a lot. And then just go to your local karting track and keep practicing over there.
Great advice. So we'll take one more question because we'll have to get the next speaker in.
Yeah.
Should we use clutch in steering over conventional foot lever for better reach? This from Abhishek Pandey.
I would say that depends, Abhishek, completely on what is your design. Traditionally, the clutch has always been in the foot, except in race cars. So if your driver is going to keep pressing the floor, then it's better to stick to a floor clutch. But if you're using a conventional gearbox where you need to keep changing gears for during the competition, then I would say definitely keep the clutch on the floor. But if you're using a dog box, which is used only where, I mean, with that type of a gearbox, you only need the clutch to get the car rolling. Once you're rolling, if you don't need the clutch to change gears, then it makes sense to have it on the hand for space saving reasons or any other reason. The reason why Formula cars do not have the clutch on the floor is because of space constraints. The inside of the cockpit where the feet of the car of the drivers are is basically maybe only so big, so they have only space for the brake pedal and the accelerator pedal. They don't have space for a clutch pedal. That is the reason why Formula cars today have the clutch on the hand. Also, like I said, they use the clutch only during the start to get rolling. After that, they do not use the clutch at all. So in such a situation, it makes sense to go on the steering wheel. But if you have to keep changing gear, if you need the clutch to change from first to second to third to fourth and back down, then you should have it on the floor. Thank you.